Today I'd like to continue our discussion of the book Undoing the Knots by Maureen Connolly. Excellent book about examining racism within ourselves, our church, our country, our community. Taking a look last time about the concept of white entitlement. Very interesting concept in terms of do white people kind of feel because they're white that they are entitled to maybe kind of a higher status than black people or brown people or yellow people or red people or orange people or purple people. And many times you'll hear that, well, we were here first. We came before anybody else. Um, and so those who came later, they more or less have to wait their turn. Maybe we have a greater status. Maybe we have more wealth. Maybe we have higher rates of employment, but that's just kind of the way it is. We've worked hard for that. We haven't been lazy. We've tried hard. We've given our all. Look what we've done to build up the country. You hear that type of reasoning, and there's a certain, of course, logic to it. Of course, when you think of we were here first, certainly we weren't. I mean, Native Americans were here many centuries before we were, but that is the general concept in terms of white entitlement. And so we can get into a kind of a mentality where we as whites have to kind of protect what we have because, there's this struggle between, people who have things and people who don't have things. And if we give too much to the other side who doesn't have too much, then maybe we won't have as much and we will suffer. And, we don't want to give anything up. And of course, you talk to most people, that's, the logical response. Well, if it means that I have to give something up, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna do that. I've worked hard for what I have. I don't want to give anything up. I don't want to give any of my money, any of my property, any of my valuables. I don't want to give that to somebody else. I mean, I worked hard for that, is the concept. And so we tend to want to protect our wages from other people who might be on the lower end and they're coming up. And the boss might say, well, we only have so much money. Let's divide it up this way. And we're, wait a minute. I'm not going to take a cut in salary so that somebody else can get a better wage. That's not the way it works. I mean, I've worked hard for my salary. I want to keep it. I just want it to go up. I definitely don't want it to go down. You can understand that attitude, right? Also, property values. I've worked hard for my home. I put a lot of time and effort into it. I've worked hard at my job to get the wealth to acquire my home. I spruce up my home all the time. I'm adding to its value. I don't want to give that up to somebody else who might come into my neighborhood and God forbid my property values go down because this person doesn't take care of their home to the same degree of excellence that I take care of my home. Maybe they don't, mow their lawn as frequently, or it's not as landscaped as well. They don't put their garbage out as much. They haven't painted their home. Their roof is not as good as my roof, that type of thing. So people, understandably, they don't want their property values to go down. Also, in terms of test scores, I have worked hard to achieve a certain test score. I don't want the test questioned. I don't want you to say, well, there's a bias in the testing system. No, I don't want that. I worked hard to get that mark, that grade. I worked hard on my SAT prep. I spent a lot of money going to prep courses to take it. You might say, well, these other people, they're not as wealthy. They can't take the preparation courses to bring their scores up. Well, it's just too bad for them. I mean, I'm not going to give up what I did for them. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. Also, inheritance. I have a nice inheritance that I've gotten. I don't want to be taxed on that. I don't want to give some of it up. My parents worked hard for that. That's money that's entitled to us within our family. Say, unfortunately, you don't have any inheritance. Your parents weren't able to accumulate that much wealth. Well, that's your problem. I mean, that's the way that we can tend to look at that. So the idea that I'm white, I'm going to protect what I have, is a fairly common concept in our culture. And so to unpack that a little bit is it's going to be difficult for us. Let's be honest, because we're used to that. We accept it. It's the way it is. It's the way it should be. And so when we look at this concept of white entitlement, white privilege, uh, we can tend to look at it in terms of this concept of individual sinfulness versus sinful institutions. And a lot of times where we come down on it is in terms of the idea that it is the sin of the individual that we concentrate on. The sin of the individual in terms of racism. Well, you're a racist. You're a racist because you say racist comments, you demean another race, you have this prejudice, you discriminate, you don't give the other person a fair chance. That's an individual fault that you have. So we look at the other side of the coin, we say, well, what about sinful institutions? We say, well, wait a minute. What do you mean, a sinful institution? Sinful institution would be an example of a institution that has evolved over times, that they do discriminate as an institution, but it's something that we frequently are unaware of, that they are discriminating against a certain group. And so it becomes what we call an institutional example of racism. So the most obvious example that is raised in terms of housing, redlining was brought into existence because certain areas were thought not to be that good in terms of real estate investments, so we're not going to give people a mortgage if they live in those areas. So those areas were marked with red on a map, and they became kind of standard in terms of the housing industry. Now, what that did was it denied the opportunity for housing to a large segment of our population. And so it became an example of an institutional racism, something that happened. It seemed like a logical evolution in terms of the housing market. Well, in this area, the property is not as nice as another area. Their housing seems to be more run down. Their income level is not as high. And so, it made sense for bankers who are very cautious by nature. They certainly don't want to lose any money and invest money in a certain area, and they don't get the same return. They're not into that, obviously. So it seemed like a logical progression. But what it led to was a lack of opportunity for many people, unfortunately. And that has implications even for today, as we will unpack going forward. Because even though it happened many years ago, uh, people today uh, have not been able to accumulate the same level of wealth because of it. So the idea of passing on wealth from one member of the family to another has been hindered by that practice. And still today, there are many victims of that. So as we go forward, we'll unpack some of those considerations as well.